Story 1. My dad took his own life about 2 weeks ago. The sound of my alarm pierced through the silence of my room, yanking me from a restless sleep. It was 6:30 a.m., just another school day. At least, that's what I told myself. But every morning since Dad's death felt like a betrayal to his memory, a mocking rhythm of life carrying on when his had come to an abrupt, heart-wrenching halt. 2 weeks ago, Dad took his own life. It still didn't feel real, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The house felt different without him in it. His laugh, his presence, they used to fill every corner, but now it was like the walls were grieving with me. I forced myself out of bed, dragging my feet to the bathroom. Staring into the mirror, I barely recognized the person looking back at me. Puffy eyes, a face etched with exhaustion, it was the reflection of someone who hadn't stopped crying long enough to catch her breath. School felt like a mountain I wasn't ready to climb. But dropping out wasn't an option. Dad always said education was the key to everything, and the thought of letting him down weighed heavy on my chest. That morning, I sat at the breakfast table, absently poking at a bowl of cereal. Mom had stopped cooking breakfast since it happened. She sat across from me, holding a cup of coffee like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her silence screamed louder than words ever could. "I'm going to school," I mumbled, breaking the suffocating stillness. Mom looked up, her tired eyes searching mine. "Are you sure?" she asked. It wasn't a question of logistics, it was her way of asking if I was ready. I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. The school hallways were a minefield. Every glance, every whisper, it all felt like a spotlight on my grief. I knew people were talking. I overheard snippets of conversations, awkward pauses when I walked by. The worst part? The pity in their eyes. I hated it. I headed straight to my locker, avoiding eye contact. My best friend, Emma, was already there, leaning against the wall. She straightened when she saw me, her face softening into a cautious smile. "Hey," she said, her voice gentle. Too gentle. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone flat. I didn't want gentle. I wanted normal. I wanted her to crack a dumb joke or complain about math class, anything but this carefully constructed version of herself. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked, hesitating as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. "No," I said quickly, slamming my locker shut. "I just want to get through the day." Emma nodded, falling into step beside me as we headed to class. I could feel her eyes on me, like she was waiting for me to break down. But I wouldn't. Not here. In the classroom, it was worse. My teacher, Mrs. Bennett, paused mid-sentence when I walked in, her expression softening into the same pity I saw everywhere else. "It's good to see you back, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with concern. I mumbled a thank you and slid into my seat. My classmates avoided my gaze, their silence louder than any condolences. By lunchtime, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in, the noise of the cafeteria a dull roar in the background. Emma sat across from me, trying to fill the silence with small talk, but her words felt like static in my ears. I excused myself, muttering something about needing air, and escaped to the bathroom. Locking myself in a stall, I sank to the floor, the weight of the day crashing down on me. By the time the final bell rang, I felt like a ghost drifting through the hallways. My mask of calm was starting to crack, and I could feel the emotions bubbling just beneath the surface. But I refused to cry, not here, not where everyone could see. As I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, Mrs. Bennett called out, "Can I see you for a moment, Lily?" I froze. The last thing I wanted was a heart-to-heart with a teacher. But I couldn't exactly say no, so I nodded and trudged to her desk. She smiled warmly, gesturing for me to sit. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her tone soft. I shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "I'm fine." "You don't have to be," she said, leaning forward. "Losing a parent is an unimaginable pain. It's okay to feel overwhelmed." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I had to fight the urge to lash out. How could she possibly understand what I was going through? I just want to focus on school, I said, my voice tight. I don't want to talk about it. Mrs. Bennet studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right. But if you ever need to talk, my door is always open. As I walked out of the classroom, I felt a mix of relief and frustration. Everyone wanted me to talk, to spill my guts and cry on their shoulder. But that wasn't going to happen. Not now. Maybe not ever. At home, the silence was deafening. Mom was in her room, the door closed like a barrier between us. It had been that way ever since the funeral. We barely talked, each of us drowning in our own grief. I dropped my bag on the floor and sank onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. The house felt like a vacuum, all the warmth and life sucked out of it. I thought about Dad's laugh, the way it used to fill the space. Now it was just an echo in my memory. Sleep had become a battleground. Every night, I braced myself for the inevitable, the dreams. Sometimes they were memories of Dad, happy ones, like when he taught me how to ride a bike or his goofy dance moves in the kitchen. But other nights, the dreams were darker. That night, I dreamed of the day we found him. It was as if my mind had cruelly pressed replay, forcing me to relive every excruciating detail. The stillness of his body, the note clutched in his hand, Mom's scream, it all came rushing back, vivid and relentless. I woke up gasping, my chest heaving like I'd just run a marathon. The room was pitch black, but I could hear the faint hum of the TV in the living room. Mom must have fallen asleep on the couch again. Throwing off the covers, I padded down the hallway, my feet cold against the hardwood floor. Sure enough, there she was, curled up on the couch, the TV playing some old sitcom she wasn't even watching. Her eyes were closed, but I could tell she wasn't really sleeping. Mom, I whispered. She stirred but didn't open her eyes. You should go to bed. She sighed and turned her head toward me. Can't sleep, she murmured, her voice raspy. I sat down on the edge of the couch, wrapping my arms around my knees. Me neither. For a moment, we just sat there in silence, the faint laugh track on the TV filling the void. I wanted to say something, anything, to break through the wall that had grown between us. But the words wouldn't come. Finally, Mom spoke. He'd hate this, you know, she said, her voice trembling. Seeing us like this. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I know. But knowing didn't make it any easier. The next morning, I felt the weight of my sleepless night pressing on me like a boulder. My legs were heavy as I walked to school, the sky a dull gray that seemed to mirror my mood. Every step felt like wading through molasses. Emma caught up with me near the gates. Hey, she said, a little out of breath. I texted you last night. You didn't respond. Sorry, I mumbled. Didn't see it. She studied me, her brow furrowing. You look like you didn't sleep. I shrugged, trying to brush her off, but Emma wasn't one to give up easily. Lily, I know you're trying to act like you're okay, but I'm your best friend. I can see right through it. Her words hit a nerve. What do you want me to do, Emma? I snapped. Break down in the middle of the hallway? Cry to everyone about how much this hurts? That's not going to change anything. Emma flinched, but she didn't back down. I don't want you to do anything you're not ready for. I hate seeing you go through this alone. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw tears welling up in her eyes. It caught me off guard. Emma was always the strong one, the one who had it together. Seeing her upset was like a mirror reflecting back my own pain. I'm sorry, I whispered, my anger evaporating. I didn't mean to yell. She nodded, wiping her eyes. It's okay. I want to help, but I don't know how. For a moment, I hesitated. Letting someone in felt like opening a dam. Once I started, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop. But Emma had been my rock for so long. If I couldn't lean on her, who could I lean on? I miss him, I admitted, my voice barely audible. Every second of every day. And I hate that the world just keeps going like nothing happened. Emma reached out, squeezing my hand. I miss him too, she said softly. He was like a second dad to me. Her words cracked something open in me, and before I knew it, the tears I'd been holding back for weeks came flooding out. Emma pulled me into a hug, and for the first time since Dad died, I didn't feel completely alone. By the time I got home, something felt lighter, just a little, but enough to notice. Letting the tears out with Emma, saying those words out loud, it was like I'd let go of some of the weight I'd been carrying. Mom was in the kitchen, staring at a half-empty mug of coffee. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes looked just as tired as mine. I hesitated in the doorway, unsure if I should say anything. But then I thought about Emma. About how opening up to her, even just a little, had made a difference. I walked into the kitchen and sat across from Mom. She looked up, surprised. Hey, she said. How was school? Okay, I said, tracing the rim of the coffee cup in front of me. It was hard, but Emma was there for me. Mom's eyes softened. She's a good friend. She is, I said, nodding. Then, after a pause, I asked, what about you? Are you okay? The question caught her off guard. She blinked, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out at first. Finally, she said, I'm trying. Some days are harder than others. Same, I admitted. We sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared grief hanging in the air. But it didn't feel as suffocating as before. It felt manageable. I miss him, I said finally, my voice breaking. Mom reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. Her grip was firm, grounding. I miss him too. Every day. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it didn't need to be. In that quiet moment, I realized something: grief didn't have to be something we carried alone. It was messy and painful, but maybe, just maybe, it could also bring us closer. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Dad. About his laugh, his hugs, the way he used to say, "You're stronger than you think, Lily." For the first time in weeks, I believed him. Story 2. My sister is pressuring me to convert to her religion. Growing up, my sister Emma and I were inseparable. Despite a 4-year age gap, we were each other's shadow. I marveled at her boundless confidence, she admired my curiosity about the world. But things changed after Emma's year abroad during college. She came back with a new glow, not just from the sunny streets of Greece where she studied, but something deeper, something spiritual. Emma had found religion. I didn't think much of it at first. People discover themselves in all sorts of ways when they're young. Her new habits, attending church, journaling about her faith, seemed like a wholesome evolution. I even envied her conviction. I had always wavered, too skeptical to commit to anything bigger than myself. But Emma's faith grew, and so did the tension between us. Subtle comments became sharp directives. "You'd feel so much better about life if you came with me to church," she said one morning over breakfast, sliding a pamphlet across the table. "I'm fine, thanks," I replied, smiling politely as I pushed it back. She frowned. "No, you're not. You're always so scattered. This could help you find peace." Her words stung. Scattered? I liked to think of myself as multifaceted, juggling the chaos of work and relationships while figuring out who I wanted to be. Emma's insinuation felt more like judgment than concern. That day marked the beginning of her campaign. Every family dinner turned into a debate. She'd slip verses into casual conversation or recount parables with wide-eyed enthusiasm, like a missionary in our own living room. My polite refusals became firmer, but Emma wasn't one to back down. One Sunday, she went a step further, dragging Mom and Dad into it. "We all care about Lily," she said, her voice thick with passion. "We should encourage her to open her heart to God." I gaped at her. "You're talking about me like I'm not even here." Emma looked hurt, but didn't back off. I just want the best for you. I stormed out before I said something I'd regret. But deep down, a question lingered, one I wasn't ready to confront. Was Emma trying to help or control me? Emma didn't let up after that argument. If anything, my resistance seemed to fuel her determination. Pamphlets appeared in my apartment, left behind after her visits. She'd text me Bible verses with vague captions like, "Thinking of you." It wasn't just the gestures, it was the subtle ways she chipped away at me. At family gatherings, Emma found ways to weave her faith into every conversation. When I joked about needing a strong cup of coffee to survive Monday mornings, she countered, "Or maybe you just need prayer." One Saturday, she showed up at my place unannounced. "Hey. I thought we could hang out," she said, breezing past me into the living room. "Oh, sure," I said, masking my surprise. Emma hadn't been spontaneous in years. She settled on my couch, holding up a thick book. "I brought something for us to do together." The cover said it all, Exploring Faith, a beginner's guide to spiritual fulfillment. "Emma," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "We've talked about this." "I know, but hear me out," she interrupted, her tone bright and pleading. "Just give it a shot. One chapter. If you hate it, I won't bring it up again. I promise." I stared at her. This was Emma's strategy now, framing her efforts as harmless, manageable. But agreeing, even once, felt like surrender. "Why can't you accept that I'm fine as I am?" I asked, my voice trembling. Emma's expression softened, but there was something patronizing in her gaze. "Because I know you're not, Lily. You think you're okay, but I see you struggling. I just want you to feel what I feel. It's amazing. You're my sister, I can't just sit back and do nothing." I felt the air tighten around me. She thought she was saving me, but it felt like she was erasing me, bit by bit. "No, Emma. What you're doing is making me feel small. Like my life isn't enough for you unless it matches yours." "That's not love, it's control," I said, my voice breaking as I stood up. Emma recoiled like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "Neither is forcing this on me," I shot back. "If you really cared, you'd let me figure out my life my way." Emma left shortly after, her face a mix of anger and hurt. I thought maybe I'd finally drawn a clear boundary. But as the door clicked shut, a wave of guilt washed over me. Had I been too harsh? Or was this the only way to protect myself from the sister I barely recognized anymore? For weeks, Emma and I barely spoke. Our calls dwindled into terse exchanges about family obligations. When we did see each other, the air between us felt heavy, as if our words were tiptoeing around the wreckage of our last argument. I wanted to believe she'd finally taken my words to heart, but deep down, I knew Emma wasn't one to back off for long. That suspicion was confirmed when Mom called one evening. "You know, Emma's worried about you," she said, her voice tinged with concern. I groaned inwardly. "Let me guess, she's been talking to you about religion?" "She just wants to help," Mom said defensively. "I think it's sweet how much she cares." "Sweet?" I snapped. "It's suffocating. She's treating me like some broken project she can fix." Mom sighed. "You're overreacting. Why not just go with her once? It wouldn't hurt, Lily." My throat tightened. It wasn't just Emma anymore, her influence was spreading. I could feel my family quietly shifting sides, buying into her narrative that I was somehow lost. "I have to go, Mom," I said, ending the call before my frustration boiled over. The next day, Emma texted me, "Family dinner this Friday at my place. Hope to see you there." I almost didn't go. But skipping it felt like letting her win, like admitting I was avoiding her. So I showed up, determined to keep things civil. Emma greeted me warmly at the door, all smiles and hugs, like nothing had happened. "I'm so glad you came," she said, guiding me inside. The evening was fine, at first. We ate, laughed, and reminisced. For a brief moment, it felt like old times. Then Emma cleared her throat, lifting her glass. I just want to say how grateful I am for all of you, she began, her tone serious. And how much I hope we can continue to grow together, not just as a family, but spiritually. The table fell silent. I froze, my stomach tightening. She looked directly at me, her eyes brimming with sincerity. Lily, you're such an important part of my life, and it would mean so much to me if we could share this journey together. The words hung in the air, heavy and expectant. All eyes turned to me. Emma, I said quietly, my voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside me. This isn't the time or place for this conversation. Her face fell, but she didn't relent. Why not? I'm just saying how I feel. It's not a big deal. It is to me, I said, my tone sharper now. Can't we just have one dinner without you turning it into this? Emma's expression hardened. This isn't just about me, Lily. It's about all of us, about our family's future. I pushed back my chair and stood. If you can't respect my boundaries, I can't do this. As I walked out, the murmurs of the family followed me, blending with Emma's plaintive calls for me to come back. I didn't stop. That night, lying awake in bed, I couldn't shake the image of Emma's face, hurt, confused, desperate. How had we come to this? Emma didn't contact me after the dinner. For a week, then too, the silence between us became its own kind of communication, a standoff neither of us was willing to break. I felt torn between relief and guilt. Then came the email. The subject line read, "A letter from the heart." I hesitated before clicking, my chest tightening as I braced myself. Lily, it began, I know you're upset with me, and I'm sorry if I've hurt you. That was never my intention. But I can't ignore the pain I feel seeing you struggle without faith. I've been praying for you every day, asking God to show me how to reach you. This letter is my answer. It went on for paragraphs, detailing her spiritual journey, how it had healed her, and why she believed it could heal me too. Emma described a version of me that didn't feel like me at all, a restless soul, adrift and unfulfilled. By the end, her plea was clear, come to church with me. Just once. Let me show you what's possible. I'll never ask again if you don't feel it's right. But please, give it a chance. For me. I closed the email and stared at the screen. Her words stirred something raw inside me. I wasn't restless or adrift, was I? I had a good job, close friends, hobbies I enjoyed. But now, I found myself questioning everything. And then, the anger crept in. How dare she presume to know what I needed better than I did? Her love felt more like an invasion, like she was tearing me down to rebuild me in her image. I didn't respond. The following Sunday, I went to a bookstore, eager for a distraction. As I browsed the shelves, I heard Emma's familiar laugh. I turned, heart sinking, and saw her with a group of women, likely her church friends. She spotted me before I could leave. Lily, she called, her face lighting up. I plastered on a smile as she approached, her friends lingering nearby. Hey, Emma. Are you here for the book club? She asked, clearly excited. No, just browsing, I said, glancing at the exit. Emma's smile faltered. Well, maybe you'd like to join us sometime. It's a great way to connect. Emma, please stop, I said, my voice low, but firm. Her brows knitted. Stop what? This, I gestured between us. Pushing. Prodding. It's too much. She looked genuinely hurt, but I pressed on. I love you, but you have to let me live my life without constantly trying to change it. If you can't, I don't know how we move forward. For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded, her voice small. I hear you. I'll try. The exchange felt hollow, her words more placating than genuine. As I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the verge of something irreparable. Weeks passed with little contact. Emma kept her word, no surprise visits, no texts with Bible verses. But instead of relief, I felt an emptiness creeping in. The silence between us wasn't healing, it was a gaping wound that neither of us knew how to close. One Friday evening, as I settled in with a book, there was a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Emma standing there, holding a small plant in her hands. Her face looked softer, more hesitant than I'd ever seen it. "Hi," she said when I opened the door. "I promise I'm not here to preach." She held up the plant with a sheepish smile. "Peace offering?" I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding and stepped aside to let her in. She placed the plant on my coffee table, glancing around the room as though trying to assess my mood. "I've missed you," she said finally. "I've missed you too," I admitted. "But I need to know you're not just here to fix me." Emma sat down, clasping her hands together. "I've been thinking about what you said. A lot. And you're right, I was trying to change you. Not because I thought you were broken," she added quickly, "but because I wanted to share something that's been so important to me. I didn't realize how much I was suffocating you." Her words surprised me. For the first time, it felt like she was seeing me, really seeing me, as someone separate from her ideals. "I never wanted to hurt you," she continued, her voice cracking. "I just didn't know how else to connect with you anymore." I swallowed hard, my throat tight with emotion. "Emma, I love you. But I need you to understand that I'm not you. And I need you to love me for who I am, not for who you think I could be." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'll try. I mean it this time. I just don't want to lose you." As we sat there, the weight between us began to lift, if only slightly. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, we were both stubborn, and years of closeness had turned our differences into battlegrounds. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope that we could find our way back to each other. That night, as Emma left, she paused at the door. "One day, if you ever feel like it, I'd love for you to come see what this is about. No pressure, I promise." "I'll think about it," I said, and this time, I meant it, not as a concession, but as an acknowledgement that love is a two-way street. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.